The Sierra Nevada mountains loomed against the gunmetal sky like ancient sentinels carved from granite and shadow, their jagged peaks already dusted with early winter snow. The world above 8,000 feet had begun its seasonal transformation, cloaking familiar terrain in a deceptive blanket of white that obliterated landmarks and disguised deadly crevasses beneath a pristine facade of beauty. For the experienced members of Pinecrest County Search and Rescue, this annual metamorphosis meant one thing: the beginning of the most dangerous rescue season of the year. At the PCSR headquarters, a reinforced lodge-style building nestled among towering pines at the base of Echo Ridge, veteran team members moved with practiced efficiency as the forecast called for another major storm system by nightfall. The scent of pine equipment wax and freshly brewed coffee filled the air as rescue workers checked gear and studied topographical maps spread across weathered tables. The atmosphere carried the particular focused energy that preceded complex operations, a mixture of tension and resolute calm born from years of facing nature's most unforgiving challenges. Megan Foster zipped her bright orange SAR jacket with practiced precision, checking each pocket for essential equipment. At 38, her weathered face told the story of 15 years in the mountain rescue, laugh lines around her eyes from rare moments of triumph, a permanent furrow between her brows from countless difficult decisions, and a small scar above her right eyebrow from a rock slide during an evacuation 3 years prior. Her hands, strong and capable, bore the calluses of someone who trusted equipment with her life, yet knew that sometimes bare hands were all that stood between a victim and the abyss. Final equipment check, she murmured to herself, an old habit from her military days. Radio extra batteries, first aid thermal, blankets, signal mirror, multi-tool cordage, water protein, bars, emergency shelter, choin. Beside her, Ranger sat at perfect attention, his border collie and German Shepherd heritage evident in his intelligent amber eyes and alert posture. The 5-year-old rescue dog's black and tan coat gleamed under the fluorescent lights, freshly brushed, but bearing the small permanent scar along his left flank, a reminder of the circumstances under which he joined the team. His specialized search harness, equipped with GPS tracking and reflective trim, waited beside Megan's backpack. Megan had never intended to become a search and rescue specialist. 15 years ago, she had been pursuing a promising career in environmental engineering with a focus on water management systems. Her life had been meticulously planned. Finish her master's degree at UC Davis, accept the position waiting at an established consulting firm in Sacramento. Eventually buy a house in the suburbs with her fiancé, Paul. Then came the accident that reshaped everything. A weekend hiking trip in desolation, wilderness with Paul and their friends had turned catastrophic when an unexpected early autumn storm descended without warning. The group had become separated in the whiteout conditions. Paul and their friend Marcos had fallen into a ravine. By the time search and rescue teams located them 18 hours later, Paul had succumbed to his injuries and Marcos was suffering from severe hypothermia. Megan had watched from behind safety lines as the SAR team worked with grim efficiency, their movements precise even in the terrible conditions. "I'm sorry," where the team leader had told her, snow clinging to his beard as he delivered the news that would forever divide her life into before and after. "We found him too late." 3 months later, still reeling from the loss, Megan had abandoned her career plans and applied to the volunteer search and rescue training program. If the SAR teams had found Paul even an hour earlier, the doctors said he might have survived. That knowledge haunted her, propelling her into a new vocation, with the intensity of someone who understood exactly what was at stake with every mission. The volunteer position had eventually become full-time as her aptitude and dedication became apparent. 6 years in, she had risen to team leader status, respected for her technical proficiency and unwavering focus in crisis situations. But despite her professional success, colleagues often noted her emotional detachment. The invisible wall she maintained between herself and others, a protective barrier built from personal tragedy. Ranger had been restless since dawn, behavior he typically only exhibited before particularly difficult missions. He'd paced the living room of Megan's small cabin, watching the door expectantly hours before the call had come in. "You sensing something today, buddy?" Megan murmured, noticing the subtle change in her partner's demeanor. She scratched behind his ears, feeling the slight tremble in his muscles that indicated heightened awareness. "Something out there, bothering you?" Ranger's eyes met hers with an intensity that always made Megan wonder just how much the animal understood about their work. She'd learned to trust these pre-mission indicators. They had saved lives more than once. Mike Chen approached, offering a steaming mug of coffee. At 42, Chen had been with PCSR longer than anyone except Commander Reynolds. His Asian-American heritage gave him a perpetually youthful appearance that belied 20 years of mountain rescue experience. The small wrinkles at the corners of his eyes were the only indication of his age, and the countless hours spent squinting against mountain glare. "Ranger's got the pre-mission jitters again," Chen observed, nodding toward the dog. "Last time he acted like this was the Johnston rescue." Megan nodded, accepting the coffee gratefully. The Johnston case had been particularly harrowing. A family of 4 trapped in a vehicle swept into a flooded canyon. Against all probability, Ranger had located the survivors clinging to a partially submerged tree nearly half a mile downstream from where statistical models suggested they should search. "Something's definitely got him worked up," she agreed, sipping the strong black coffee. "How's the forecast looking?" Not good," Chen admitted, pulling up the latest weather data on his tablet. "Fronts moving faster than predicted. We're looking at heavy snowfall starting around 1400 hours with potential whiteout conditions. By 1700, wind gusts potentially exceeding 50 miles per hour on exposed ridgelines." Megan studied the animated radar image, watching the massive storm system approaching from the northwest. Years of experience let her translate the colorful digital display into practical realities dangerously reduced. Visibility, increased avalanche risk, hypothermia conditions, and a rapidly closing window for any rescue operations. Commander Thomas Reynolds strode into the equipment room, radio crackling at his shoulder. At 54, Reynolds carried himself with the rigid posture of his 20 years in Coast Guard search and rescue before moving inland to the mountains. His salt and pepper hair was cropped in a perpetual military-style cut, and the lines around his eyes had deepened with each season of lost hikers and fallen climbers. His face bore the grim expression of a man who had seen too many mountain tragedies over the years. Foster Highway Patrol reported a vehicle that likely went off Cascade Canyon Road during last night's storm. He announced without preamble, no confirmed location yet, but the reporting party saw headlight reflections off the snow before losing sight of them. Megan nodded, mentally mapping the area. A treacherous stretch of mountain highway with sharp switchbacks and steep drop-offs that had claimed more than its share of victims over the years. "Any information on occupants?" "Single vehicle, unknown number of passengers," Reynolds replied, pulling up a satellite image on the wall-mounted display. "Last cell ping puts them somewhere in this 5-mile stretch. Silver Toyota Camry with California plates registered to an Olivia Parker from Sacramento. Air support?" Megan asked, already knowing the answer, as she glanced toward the windows where heavy clouds hung like a threat over the mountains. "Can't fly in these conditions," Reynolds confirmed with a tight frown. "With this front moving in, we're looking at ground teams only." The lieutenant governor's office called. Apparently, the vehicle belongs to the daughter of someone on his staff. They're pushing for immediate response. "So, political pressure on top of the weather clock?" Megan observed, checking the atmospheric readings on her tablet. "We've got maybe 5 hours before the next front hits. After that, conditions will be impossible." Reynolds nodded grimly. "I'm deploying 3 primary search teams. Peterson and Alvarez will take the upper switchbacks, Rodriguez and Washington covering the lower canyon. You and Torres handle the middle section where the last cell ping originated." He paused, studying Megan's face. "This storm's coming in hot, Foster. I need clean communication and adherence to search protocols. No heroics." His emphasis on protocol wasn't coincidental. 3 months earlier, Megan had diverged from the assigned search grid during another rescue following Ranger's lead instead of the established pattern. While they had successfully located the missing hikers, Reynolds had formally reprimanded her for the deviation. Their professional relationship, once built on mutual respect, had been strained ever since. "Understood, sir," Megan replied evenly. "We'll maintain search discipline." Megan checked Ranger's specialized rescue harness, attaching the emergency medical pouch that contained basic supplies she might need to stabilize survivors. The dog stood perfectly still during this ritual, understanding its importance through years of training and field experience. His eyes never left her face, reading her expressions with the intuitive understanding that had made them one of the most successful handler dog teams in the program's history. Their partnership had evolved in unexpected ways since the day Megan had found him. After discovering the puppy during the flash flood rescue, Megan had intended to find him a suitable home. Once he recovered, the veterinarian who treated him had estimated he was about 4 months old. Likely a border collie and German shepherd mix, and remarkably healthy despite his ordeal. He's got good bone structure and his cognitive responses are excellent, Dr. Keller had noted while examining the trembling puppy. "Somebody took good care of this little guy before he ended up in that flood. Any microchip or identification?" Megan had asked. Nothing, and no reports of missing puppies matching his description from the surrounding communities. The vet had replied, "With his intelligence and physical attributes, he'd make an excellent working dog with the right training." Megan had taken the puppy home temporarily, naming him Ranger after the National Park Service Rangers who had assisted in the flood rescue. She'd planned to find him a permanent home within a few weeks, but something about the dog's focused attention and uncanny perceptiveness had captured her interest. On a whim, she'd begun basic obedience training, surprised by how quickly he mastered each command. When Ranger was 8 months old, Megan had brought him to a weekend search and rescue demonstration for the local community. The event included various stations showing equipment techniques and training exercises, including a demonstration with the program's certified search dogs. Ranger had watched the proceedings with unusual intensity, his attention locked on the working dogs as they performed their tasks. During a break in the demonstrations, one of the trainers had approached Megan. "That's a fine-looking dog you've got," he'd commented. "Mind if I introduce myself?" The trainer, Elliot Ramirez, had spent 20 minutes assessing Ranger through a series of informal exercises, eventually turning to Megan with raised eyebrows. "This dog has extraordinary potential. His focus and problem-solving approach are well beyond what we typically see in untrained animals. Have you considered SAR work for him?" The suggestion had seemed preposterous at first. ESSR dogs typically came from specialized breeding programs or were selected after rigorous assessment. The idea that her flood-rescued temporary dog might qualify seemed far-fetched. Yet 6 months later, Ranger had completed his initial certification, outperforming dogs with professional breeding backgrounds. By his second year, he had participated in 7 successful rescues, demonstrating an almost preternatural ability to locate survivors in challenging conditions. By his third year, he and Megan had become the team that others requested when conditions were at their worst or time was critically short. Outside the SAR headquarters, the first advanced snowflakes began to fall as Megan knelt to Ranger's level, performing their pre-mission ritual that centered them both. She placed her forehead gently against his, feeling his warm breath against her face. "Let's go find them, boy," she whispered. "Keep your wits sharp today." Nathan Torres approached medical backpack already secured over his insulated jacket. At 35, the former wilderness medicine instructor had the lean, efficient build of someone who moved through mountains as naturally as through city streets. His dark hair was pulled back in a short ponytail, and the silver pendant of St. Bernard, patron saint of mountaineers, glinted at his throat above his SAR-issued thermal base layer. "Now, trucks are loaded and ready," he reported. "I've packed extra warming blankets and the portable oxygen given the conditions and potential extended exposure of the victims." Torres had joined the team 4 years earlier after moving from New Mexico to California. His background in wilderness medicine made him invaluable during complex rescues, while his calm demeanor provided steadying influence in chaotic situations. He and Megan had developed an efficient working relationship built on mutual respect, and minimal unnecessary conversation, exactly what Megan preferred in a field partner. What Megan appreciated most about Torres was his comfort with silence. Unlike some team members who felt compelled to fill quiet moments with chatter, Torres understood that sometimes words were superfluous. It was a quality that had made their partnership particularly effective over the years. Torres had also accepted Ranger's unusual capabilities without skepticism or excessive questions. After witnessing the dog's exceptional performance during their first mission together, locating an injured climber who had fallen into a crevasse covered by a recent snowfall, Torres had simply nodded and said, "That dog sees things we don't. I'm good with that." The convoy of search vehicles wound its way up Cascade Canyon Road, windshield wipers battling the increasingly heavy snowfall. The gray-white landscape seemed to swallow all color, creating a monochromatic world where distances became deceptive and landmarks disappeared under the steadily accumulating snow radio chatter. Between teams maintained professional brevity, conditions reported landmarks, identified search parameters confirmed. Beside Megan, Ranger remained unusually alert, his eyes fixed on the passing landscape, rather than resting as he typically did during transport. His ears pivoted continuously, tracking sounds beyond human perception. "He seems especially focused today," remarked Torres from the driver's seat. "Almost like he knows this one's important." "He's been like this since before we got the call," Megan replied, one hand resting reassuringly on Ranger's back. "Sometimes I swear he knows things before they happen." Torres nodded thoughtfully. "My grandmother would say he has the sight," he offered with a small smile. "She believes some animals could sense things across great distances, especially when life hung in the balance." "Your grandmother sounds like a wise woman," Megan said, watching the way Ranger's eyes tracked something unseen through the swirling snow. "She was a curandera in northern New Mexico." Torres explained, navigating a particularly treacherous curve with practiced skill. Healing traditions passed down through generations. She combined traditional herbal medicine with an almost supernatural intuition about what ailed people. "Did you learn from her?" Megan asked, surprised to find herself interested in Torres's background. Their partnership had always been focused on the present, not the past. "Some," he admitted, "enough to know that Western medicine doesn't have all the answers, even with all our technology and training." He glanced at Ranger. "My grandmother would have loved your dog. She always said animals could see the world without the filters humans place on reality." Megan considered this as they continued upward through deteriorating conditions. Her scientific training made her naturally skeptical of supernatural explanations. Yet Ranger's abilities had repeatedly defied conventional understanding. "There was this case before you joined the team," she found herself saying. "A 5-year-old autistic child went missing in Sequoia National Park. 3 days of searching with multiple teams, helicopters, thermal imaging, nothing. We were about to switch from rescue to recovery mode when Ranger and I got called in." Torres listened attentively, hands steady on the wheel, as they navigated a section where blowing snow had already begun to accumulate across the roadway. The statistical models showed a 98% probability that the boy would have remained within a 2-mile radius of where he was last seen. Megan continued, "We'd covered that area extensively without results. Ranger got on site, took one sniff of the boy's jacket, and immediately wanted to head downstream along a riverbed completely opposite from all the previous search efforts." "And you followed him?" Torres asked. "I almost didn't," Megan admitted. "It seemed so contrary to everything we knew about lost person behavior, especially for a child. But something about his certainty." She shook her head at the memory. "We followed that riverbed for nearly 4 miles. Found the boy sheltering in a hollow log, alive and relatively unharmed. He'd been following a fascination with water patterns and traveled much further than any predictive model would have anticipated. Ranger saw what all our human expertise missed," Torres concluded. "The thing is," Megan said quietly, "Ranger didn't just find a scent trail against the odds. He immediately knew where to go, as if the boy was sending out some signal only he could detect. The convoy pulled into a staging area at mile marker 37, where highway patrol officers had established a perimeter. Yellow incident tape fluttered in the strengthening wind as first responders huddled around a portable command table, steam rising from coffee cups clutched in gloved hands. Officer Sofia Rivera gestured toward the roadway, her expression grim beneath her campaign hat. At 34, she represented the new generation of highway patrol officers with 5 years of mountain road experience and a reputation for efficient professionalism. "We found some glass fragments about a quarter-mile up," Rivera explained, pointing to evidence markers barely visible through the intensifying snowfall. "Trajectory suggests the vehicle could have gone over anywhere along this 2-mile stretch. And any tire tracks?" Megan asked, scanning the roadside drop-offs that plunged hundreds of feet into dense forest and rocky terrain. "Last night's precipitation washed most evidence away." Rivera shook her head, frustration evident in her voice. "We had a witness report seeing headlights disappearing over the edge around 2300 hours, but they couldn't pinpoint the exact location. If the vehicle went deep into the ravine, we might not spot it from the road at all." "What about the cell phone ping?" Torres asked. Rivera pulled out her tablet, protected from the elements by a rugged case. "Last ping was at 2308, triangulated to somewhere in this general area." She indicated a roughly half-mile section of the roadway. "After that, nothing. Either the phone was destroyed in the crash or the battery died." "Any information about who was in the vehicle?" Megan asked, already preparing Ranger for deployment. "Driver is Olivia Parker, 32, from Sacramento. According to the vehicle registration and family members she was traveling with, her 14-month-old daughter Sophie." Rivera's professional demeanor softened slightly. They were returning from visiting her parents in Tahoe. The information sent a chill through Megan that had nothing to do with the dropping temperature. A young mother and infant potentially injured and exposed to freezing temperatures for over 12 hours already. The survival window would be closing rapidly, especially for the child. Commander Reynolds distributed search grid assignments, pointing to sections of a topographical map protected from the elements by a clear plastic overlay. The fluorescent search pattern indicators form neat, methodical rectangles across the contour lines. Team 1 takes the immediate perimeter. Team 2 heads down the main ravine. Foster, your team covers the eastern slope. Stay in radio contact and maintain hourly check-ins. If conditions deteriorate beyond safety parameters, I'll call an immediate halt to ground operations." As Megan secured Ranger's tracking harness, the dog pulled sharply toward the eastern ridge, away from their assigned search area. His ears were fully erect, body language showing the distinctive alertness that Megan recognized from previous successful searches. "Whoa, buddy!" "Not yet," Megan said, gently correcting him back to her side. "We need to start at the deployment point. Ranger showing interest in the eastern section already." Reynolds noticed his expression skeptical. "Yes, sir, might be worth concentrating resources there," Megan suggested, carefully aware of the thin ice she was treading on after her previous protocol violation. Reynolds shook his head. "The probability model suggests the southwest ravine as highest likelihood based on the roadway evidence and typical vehicle trajectory patterns. Let's stick to the assignments. We don't have manpower to chase hunches with this weather closing in." Torres caught Megan's eye with a subtle look that acknowledged the tension between following protocol and trusting Ranger's instincts. In the 3 years they'd worked together, he'd seen enough to develop a healthy respect for the dog's unusual abilities. "Ready when you are," he said, neutrally adjusting his medical backpack and checking that his avalanche transceiver was active. 20 minutes later, Megan and Torres made their way down the designated slope with Ranger leading on a long lead. The terrain was treacherous, loose shale covered with fresh snow made each step precarious, and the thick pine forest limited visibility to mere yards. The temperature continued to drop as they descended their breath, forming small clouds with each exhalation. Megan's training automatically cataloged the environmental threats: hypothermia, risk increasing, snow accumulation, reducing stable footing. Wind picking up approximately 15 knots, gusting to 25, further reducing effective temperature. visibility down to 100 yards and decreasing, every element of nature conspiring to hide whatever they were seeking and hasten failure. Throughout the methodical search, Ranger continually veered eastward, pulling against his lead toward a distant ridge outside their search zone. His normally relaxed working demeanor had been replaced by an urgency Megan had rarely seen his attention, repeatedly drawn away from the assigned grid despite his training. "Something's got his attention over there," Torres observed as Ranger again changed direction, straining toward the eastern ridgeline. "I've worked with a lot of SAR dogs, but I've never seen one this determined to break pattern. I've never seen him this focused either." Megan admitted checking their position against the GPS coordinates. Their winding search path resembled a series of compromises, beginning each search leg according to protocol, but gradually drifting eastward as she gave Ranger incremental freedom to follow his instincts. After 40 minutes of increasingly difficult progress through the deteriorating conditions, they had completed only a fraction of their assigned search area. The snow was falling heavily, now accumulating on their shoulders, and backpacks reducing visibility to less than 50 yards in some areas. The radio crackled periodically with updates from other teams, all negative. No sign of the vehicle or occupants. Megan keyed her radio. "Base, this is Foster. Kudishin." "Go ahead, Foster," Reynolds' voice replied immediately. "Ranger is showing strong directional alert toward the eastern ridge. Request permission to follow his indication." The pause that followed spoke volumes. When Reynolds finally responded, his voice carried the clipped tone of barely contained frustration. "Negative, Foster 3. Other teams are already reporting possible signs in their sectors. Maintain your assigned grid." "Over, Atka." Megan hesitated, watching Ranger. The dog had stopped pulling and now stood staring at her, his posture communicating a clear message she'd learned to read over years of partnership. "There's something important, and you're not listening." "Copy that," she responded finally, then clicked off the radio. Torres raised an eyebrow. "So we're sticking to the grid?" Megan looked from the GPS to Ranger, then to the darkening sky that promised the approaching storm's fury. 15 years of experience and training told her to follow protocol, but 5 years with Ranger had taught her something equally valuable. Sometimes instinct transcended logic. She thought about the young mother and infant potentially injured and trapped in the freezing conditions. Every minute reduced their chances of survival. The official search pattern would eventually cover the eastern ridge, but it might be hours before teams reached that area. Hours the victims might not have. Were following Ranger, she decided unclipping the lead to give the dog more freedom of movement. "Reynolds isn't going to like this," Torres warned, though he was already adjusting his medical backpack to follow. "You're already on thin ice after the Jackson Wilderness incident." "I'll take full responsibility," Megan replied. "Find them, boy. Show me." The change in Ranger was immediate and dramatic. With newfound freedom, he bounded forward with purpose, pausing occasionally to ensure his humans were following, but never deviating from his chosen direction. He led them away from the search grid, across a small stream partially frozen at the edges, and up a game trail that wound along a ridge. Most rescue workers would have dismissed as too distant from the accident site. As they climbed higher, the wind intensified, driving snow horizontally into their faces. Despite the protection of their goggles and face coverings, communication became difficult, limited to shouted fragments when absolutely necessary. The physical exertion of the ascent generated heat that countered the dropping temperature. But Megan knew that stopping for more than a few minutes would quickly become dangerous. "We're nearly half a mile outside our sector now," Torres noted as they followed Ranger's determined path. The falling snow had intensified, creating a curtain of white that reduced visibility to mere feet. "If he's wrong about this..." "He's not wrong," Megan said with quiet certainty. "I've never seen him this sure." Torres studied her face for a moment, then nodded, accepting her confidence in the dog. "Then we keep going." Ranger suddenly froze, head high, testing the wind. Then he changed direction, angling down a steeper section that required both rescuers to use their ice axes for stability. At the bottom of the small ravine, he paused again, circling an area before looking back at Megan expectantly. "What is it, boys? Show me, want you." As they scanned the area, Torres spotted at first a glint of metal beneath the accumulating snow. "There," he pointed. "Looks like vehicle debris." Megan moved carefully toward the object, brushing away snow to reveal a side view mirror. Its housing cracked, but the glass still intact. "This is fresh," she observed, examining the breakpoints. Clean fractures, no weathering or oxidation. Hope surged through her, the first tangible evidence that they weren't on a wild goose chase. Ranger's unusual behavior had led them to something concrete. "Radio it in," Torres suggested. Megan hesitated. "Let's find more evidence first. One mirror isn't enough to redirect the entire search operation." As they continued following Ranger, more evidence of a vehicle accident became visible: broken glass, twisted metal, frozen automotive fluid, creating darkened patches in the pristine snow. The dog moved with increasing urgency, following what appeared to be a debris field that stretched down the slope. The radio crackled with Reynolds' voice. "All teams, hourly check-in, report positions and findings." One by one, the other teams reported their locations and negative results. When it came to Megan's turn, she made a split-second decision. "Foster checking in. We're continuing our assigned pattern. No significant findings yet." She deliberately avoided specifying their actual location, knowing the GPS tracker on her equipment would eventually reveal the truth, but hoping to buy time until they had something definitive. Torres gave her a long look but said nothing. They both understood what was at stake, not just for the potential victims, but for Megan's career if this gamble didn't pay off. When they rounded a large boulder, the full scene finally came into view, and Megan's breath caught in her throat. A silver sedan lay crushed and crumpled at the bottom of the ravine, having apparently rolled multiple times during its descent. The vehicle's roof was partially collapsed, all windows shattered, the passenger compartment compressed to nearly half its normal height. A light dusting of fresh snow had begun to cover the wreckage, suggesting it had been there since the previous night's storm. "My God," Torres whispered, immediately switching to paramedic mode as he assessed the scene. "No way anyone walked away from that." Ranger, however, was already at the car, circling it with purpose, before sitting down firmly beside the rear driver's side door, his unmistakable indication for a confirmed find. Megan keyed her radio, knowing the moment of reckoning had arrived. "Base, this is Foster. We've located the vehicle approximately 800 feet down the eastern ravine. Well outside our assigned sector, Ranger is indicating at least one occupant." Reynolds' response was immediate. "Foster, confirm your position. Eastern ravine, approximately half a mile from assigned grid." She replied, knowing the storm that would follow this admission. Ranger led us directly to the vehicle. A brief silence followed before Reynolds responded with cold professionalism. "Understood status of occupants." Torres peered through the shattered windows. "I can't see anyone clearly inside. Driver's area is completely crushed." Yet Ranger remained fixed in position, his behavior growing more insistent. He barked again, then pawed at the crushed rear door, his message unmistakable. "Someone is in here. If there was a driver, they couldn't have survived this," Torres said quietly. "Maybe they were ejected." But Ranger wasn't moving. His behavior had shifted to a particular intensity that Megan had seen only a few times before, indicating not just the presence of a person, but someone still alive. "He thinks someone's alive in there," she said, moving to the section Ranger indicated. The rear passenger compartment, while severely damaged, had maintained slightly more structural integrity than the front seats. "That's not possible," Torres insisted, though he was already retrieving medical supplies. "The trauma from a roll like this, His words were cut short by a sound so faint it was nearly lost in the wind, a whimper from inside the crushed vehicle. Megan crouched beside the section, pressing her ear against the least damaged part of the door. For several seconds, she heard nothing but the howling wind and her own heartbeat. Then it came again, unmistakably human, unmistakably alive. A faint cry from within the mangled metal. "Someone's alive," she confirmed, a surge of adrenaline cutting through her earlier fatigue. "Radio it in. We need the extrication team here now." Torres immediately called for backup while Megan continued assessing the situation. "This is Torres. We have a confirmed survivor in the vehicle. Request immediate deployment of extrication team and medical evacuation." Reynolds' voice crackled back, professional despite the circumstances. "Understood, extrication team deploying. Now ETA approximately 40 minutes due to terrain and conditions." "What's the survivor's status?" "Key. Unknown Eritos," Torres replied. "We haven't been able to access them yet. Vehicle is severely compromised. With the storm intensifying and extraction teams at least 40 minutes away," Megan made a quick decision. "We can't wait. Whoever's inside has already been exposed to freezing temperatures for hours." From the medical pack, Torres produced thermal blankets and basic first aid supplies, while Megan assembled the elements of her personal rescue kit, a hydraulic spreader bar, glass breaking tool, and compact cutting equipment. "We need to stabilize the car first," Torres warned, eyeing the precarious positioning. One wrong move and it could slide further down. They worked methodically, despite the urgency, using rocks and fallen branches to chock the vehicle's wheels and prevent movement. The snow began to accumulate on their shoulders and equipment as they labored, the wind cutting through their protective clothing with increasing bite. Megan thought about Paul and how different this scene was from his accident. There had been no rescue equipment readily available when he felt no immediate medical response. By the time the SAR team had reached him, internal bleeding had already claimed his life. The knowledge had haunted her for years, driving her relentless pursuit of faster response times and improved techniques. "Not this time," she whispered to herself, adjusting the hydraulic spreader. "Not if I can help it." Ranger maintained his steadfast position by the rear door, occasionally pawing at the crushed metal when the sounds from inside grew more distinct, faint whimpers that tore at Megan's heart. With the vehicle as secure as possible, given their limited equipment, they focused on creating an access point. The rear window had shattered on impact, but the collapsed roof had reduced the opening to a gap barely 6 inches wide, not nearly enough to extract a victim or even properly assess their condition. Megan positioned the compact spreader against the least damaged section of the frame. "We need just enough room to see what we're dealing with without compromising what's left of the structure." Torres nodded, bracing the opposite side to prevent uneven movement as Megan activated the hydraulic tool. The metal groaned in protest, ice cracking, as the pressure slowly widened the gap by precious centimeters. Through the opening, they could now see the interior was dark and filled with deployed airbags, scattered belongings, and broken glass, but no immediately visible passenger. "Flashlight," Megan called, and Torres handed her his high-powered beam. She directed it through the widened gap, scanning the interior while speaking loudly. "This is search and rescue. Can anyone hear me?" The response wasn't a voice, but another whimper, clearer now, with the improved access and distinctly coming from the rear passenger footwell area. Ranger barked sharply, confirming Megan's growing suspicion about the nature of the sounds. "Nathan, I think it might be a child," she said, angling the light beam lower. "The sounds don't match an injured adult." The paramedic's expression tightened with renewed urgency. Pediatric victims complicated everything. Smaller bodies, more vulnerable to hypothermia, different medical protocols, greater care needed during extraction to prevent further injury. The light beam finally caught something unexpected: the distinct shape of a rear-facing car seat, partially obscured by the collapsed roof, but apparently still secured to the vehicle. Within it, barely visible through the tangle of safety straps and deployed side curtain airbags, Megan glimpsed movement, tiny fingers flexing. "There's a baby," she gasped, "infant in a car seat, rear passenger side." The discovery electrified their efforts. Torres immediately prepared pediatric medical supplies while providing a situation update over the radio. The response was immediate. A medical evacuation helicopter was being dispatched despite the dangerous conditions, with an experienced NICU team aboard. "We need a bigger access point," Megan determined, studying the vehicle's crushed frame. The car seat appeared to be wedged in place by the collapsed roof, but remarkably, the surrounding airbags had created a protective cocoon around the infant. "The car seat is actually protecting the baby, but we can't extract without removing it first," Using the spreading tool again, they carefully widened the rear window, opening a few more critical centimeters. The metal groaned alarmingly small shifts in the vehicle's position, sending cascades of snow and loose rock down the ravine. "That's all we can risk," Torres warned. "Any more pressure and we might lose what structural integrity remains." The gap was now approximately 10 inches at its widest point. Still not enough to extract a car seat, but sufficient for Megan to reach inside with one arm. Removing her bulky outer glove, she carefully extended her hand toward the infant, speaking in soft, reassuring tones. "Hey there, little one. We're here to help you, going to get you somewhere warm and safe." Her fingers made contact with impossibly soft skin, cold to the touch, but not dangerously so. The infant responded with a weak cry, more movement visible as tiny arms reached toward the human contact. Despite the dire circumstances, Megan felt a surge of hope. The baby was responsive, which was a promising sign after hours of exposure. "No visible trauma where I can reach," Megan reported after a careful assessment. The car seat and airbags created an insulated pocket, and they're wearing a snowsuit that probably saved their life. Working with one arm through the opening, Megan managed to locate the car seat release mechanism. The challenge came in maneuvering the seat through the narrow gap without causing further collapse of the unstable roof section. Throughout the delicate procedure, Ranger remained vigilant, his behavior shifting from alert to protective. When the vehicle creaked ominously during a particularly tense moment of the extraction, the dog positioned himself to brace against potential movement, using his body as an additional stabilizing force. "Almost there," Megan murmured carefully, angling the car seat toward the opening. "Just need to clear this last section of twisted metal without catching the harness." With a final careful maneuver, the car seat emerged through the gap. Inside, bundled in a now dirty pink snowsuit, was a baby girl approximately 14 months old. Her face was pale and tear-stained, but her eyes were alert, focusing immediately on her rescuers. "Hey there, brave girl," Torres said softly, his trained hands already checking vital signs while Megan wrapped thermal blankets around the car seat. "You're going to be okay now." The baby's vital signs were remarkably stable, given the circumstances. Pulse slightly elevated, but strong respiration, regular skin cool, but not dangerously cold. The car seat, designed to absorb impact forces, had performed beyond its intended parameters, protecting its precious cargo, even as the vehicle around it had crumpled under the tremendous forces of the rollover. As Torres secured the infant for transport, Megan turned her attention back to the vehicle. "We need to check for other victims. There must have been a driver." The driver's compartment had been compressed to a space incompatible with survival. Yet strangely, there was no evidence of an occupant. No clothing fragments, no blood, nothing to indicate the fate of whoever had been driving. "Where's the mother?" Megan wondered aloud. She couldn't have survived in that space, but there's no body. Torres carefully examined the front compartment through another shattered window. "Is it possible she was ejected during the crash? We would have seen evidence along the debris field," Megan replied, looking back up the slope they had descended, unless... Before she could complete the thought, Ranger suddenly abandoned his position by the vehicle, moving with renewed purpose down the slope, his nose working intensively against the wind, suggesting there was still someone to find. "He's tracking," Megan said, scrambling to follow. "Someone else is out here." 30 yards from the wreckage, Ranger stopped, abruptly circling a small area before beginning to dig urgently at what appeared to be merely another snowdrift against a fallen log. Megan joined him, clearing away snow with her gloved hands. Soon she uncovered fabric, a sleeve that matched the winter clothing visible in the wrecked vehicle. Working quickly, she revealed an arm, then a leg, then the outline of a torso. A woman lay half buried in the snow, pinned beneath a massive fallen tree trunk. Female victim located, Megan reported into her radio, checking for vital signs. To her shock, she detected a faint pulse at the woman's neck. "She's alive, Nathan. She's alive." The woman appeared to be in her early 30s, with dark hair matted with blood from a head laceration. Her skin was dangerously pale, lips tinged with blue but small clouds of vapor from her shallow breaths confirmed she was indeed clinging to life. Despite hours exposed to freezing temperatures, Torres quickly assessed her condition. Severe hypothermia, probable internal injuries, definite fracture to the left femur. The cold may have actually saved her by slowing blood loss, but we need to move her immediately. The fallen tree trunk, at least 2 feet in diameter, had trapped her left leg completely. With the woman's pulse weakening and the extraction team still not on scene, they couldn't wait for specialized equipment, using a sturdy branch as a makeshift lever and their combined climbing gear to create a pulley system. Megan positioned an improvised lifting mechanism. In 3, she instructed Torres, 1, 2, 3, and pronogen. Megan threw her full weight onto the lever muscles, straining as the massive log shifted slightly, just enough for Torres to extract the woman's crushed leg. As they worked to stabilize her, Megan made a connection. The baby, she must be the mother. She wasn't ejected from the vehicle. She was trying to get help. Sahun. The realization was stunning. This woman had somehow survived the catastrophic crash, extracted herself from the mangled vehicle, and begun making her way up the steep slope toward the road, all with severe injuries in freezing conditions, leaving her child secured in the vehicle rather than risking carrying her through the dangerous terrain. She made it almost 100 feet, Torres said in disbelief. With these injuries, that should have been impossible. Not impossible, Megan replied, thinking of the extraordinary mother before them. Just nearly so. As they prepared to move the woman, her eyelids fluttered briefly. Megan leaned closer, taking her cold hand. You're safe now. We found you and we found your baby. She's okay. You both made it. The woman's fingers seemed to tighten slightly around Megan's before she slipped back into unconsciousness. The extraction team arrived 20 minutes later, bringing advanced medical equipment and additional personnel. The storm had intensified, reducing visibility to mere feet and making the evacuation exponentially more challenging. Every movement had to be calculated, every step secured, as they prepared to transport the victims up the treacherous slope to where the medical evacuation helicopter would attempt a dangerous landing. Commander Reynolds appeared, having made the difficult descent himself despite the deteriorating conditions. His face, partially obscured by his snow-covered balaclava, betrayed nothing as he assessed the scene. Status. He asked Torres, who was monitoring the mother's vital signs. Critical but stabilized for transport. Torres reported severe hypothermia, compound fracture of the left femur, probable internal bleeding. The infant is in better condition, mild to moderate hypothermia, but strong vital signs. Reynolds nodded, then turned to Megan, who was securing the baby's car seat into a specialized transport basket. Foster a word. They stepped away from the others, the howling wind providing a measure of privacy. You directly violated orders, he stated flatly again. Yes, sir, I did, she acknowledged, meeting his gaze directly. Reynolds looked past her to where the medical team was carefully loading the infant into a specialized transport carrier, while others worked on the mother. How did you know? I didn't, Megan admitted. Ranger did. Reynolds studied the dog thoughtfully. That's twice now he's found survivors when our probability models indicated otherwise. He paused, conflict evident in his expression. The protocol exists for a reason, Foster. We can't have team members going rogue whenever they have a hunch. With respect, sir, this wasn't a hunch. Megan countered. This was a trained SAR dog with a perfect record indicating a find outside our search parameters. And if he'd been wrong, if you'd spent precious resources and time searching an empty ravine while victims were elsewhere, then I would have accepted the consequences. Megan replied simply, but he wasn't wrong. Before Reynolds could respond, the lead paramedic approached. We need to move now. The woman's condition is deteriorating, and the weather window for the airlift is closing fast. Reynolds nodded. Get them out of here, to Megan, he added. We'll discuss this further at debriefing. The evacuation proved even more challenging than the rescue. The steep, snow-covered terrain required a complex rope system to safely transport the injured mother and infant. Each team member had specific responsibilities, moving in coordinated sequences that they had practiced countless times but rarely executed in such extreme conditions. Megan took point position, scouting the safest route, while Ranger ranged ahead, somehow sensing the most stable path through the increasingly treacherous landscape. Torres monitored the victim's vital signs, making continual adjustments to maintain their fragile stability during the ascent. Halfway up the slope, the mother's condition suddenly deteriorated. Her already weak pulse became erratic, her breathing shallow and irregular. "She's crashing," Torres called above the wind. "We need to stop and stabilize." The team immediately halted, establishing a temporary shelter using their emergency equipment. Ranger positioned himself against the wind, creating an additional windbreak with his body as Torres worked frantically to stabilize his patient. "Her core temperature is still too low," he reported, administering warmed IV fluids, "and I'm detecting increased rigidity in her abdomen, possible internal bleeding, accelerating." "How far to the landing zone?" Megan asked Reynolds. "Another quarter-mile in these conditions," he replied grimly. The helicopter pilot reports he can hold position for no more than 15 minutes before fuel concerns force him to abort. The team faced an impossible calculation: continue moving and risk the mother's death from the exertion, or stabilize in place and risk missing the evacuation window for both victims. Megan made a decision. "Nathan, what do you need to get her stable enough for continued movement?" "5 minutes minimum," Torres replied, "and that's assuming everything goes perfectly." "You've got 3, Megan said to Reynolds. She added, "I'll go ahead with Ranger and prepare the LZ. Have the team ready to move in exactly 3 minutes, no matter what." Without waiting for approval, she and Ranger began the ascent at maximum safe speed. The dog seemed to understand the urgency, leading her along the most efficient route, despite near whiteout conditions. Despite the burning in her muscles and the freezing air tearing at her lungs, Megan maintained a pace that would have been dangerous under normal circumstances and was borderline reckless in these conditions. They reached the landing zone with barely 5 minutes to spare. The helicopter hovered just above the treetops' rotors, churning the falling snow into disorienting vortices. The pilot's face was barely visible through the cockpit window, his expression tense as he fought to maintain position against strengthening gusts. Megan established the landing markers and cleared loose debris that might be caught in the rotor wash. Ranger stayed close, his body tense with awareness of the closing window for rescue. 4 minutes later, the rest of the team appeared through the swirling snow, carrying the 2 victims on specialized stretchers. Torres moved alongside the mother's stretcher, still administering care, even as they approached the helicopter. The loading procedure was executed with practiced precision, despite the extreme conditions. The infant went first, secured in her car seat inside a protective medical pod. The mother followed her stretcher, locked into the helicopter's interior mounting system. Torres would accompany them to maintain care during transport, while the rest of the team would return to base by ground. As the helicopter lifted away, struggling against the turbulent air currents, Megan watched until it disappeared into the cloud ceiling. Only then did she allow herself to feel the full extent of her exhaustion. "Good work," Reynolds said, simply standing beside her in the swirling snow. "Let's get back to base before this storm gets any worse." The emergency department of Pinecrest County Medical Center buzzed with controlled urgency as the trauma team worked on Olivia Parker. Megan sat in the waiting area, Ranger lying exhausted but attentive at her feet. The storm outside rattled the windows, transforming what had been a routine search into one of the most remarkable rescues of her career. Coffee. Commander Reynolds appeared holding 2 steaming cups. His earlier frustration about protocol violations completely evaporated. In the harsh fluorescent hospital lighting, the lines in his face seemed deeper, the gray in his hair more pronounced. "Thank you." Megan accepted the coffee, gratefully warming her still-cold hands around the cup. Reynolds sat beside her, his tactical jacket creaking with the movement. For several moments, they sat in companionable silence, the shared experience of the day's events transcending their recent professional tension. "The update on their conditions?" Megan finally asked. "The baby Sophie, according to the ID in the mother's wallet, is doing remarkably well. Moderate hypothermia, some dehydration, but no apparent injuries from the crash." Reynolds took a sip of his coffee before continuing. "The mother's critical but stable multiple fractures, including a severe compound fracture of the left femur, 3 broken ribs, internal bleeding, and a significant head injury. She's in surgery now. He paused, studying the dark liquid in his cup. The fact she survived at all is being called medically extraordinary. The fact she managed to extract herself from that vehicle and attempt to find help. He shook his head in disbelief. I've been doing this for 30 years, never seen anything like it. The will to save her child, Megan said quietly. It creates a kind of strength that defies explanation. Reynolds nodded slowly. Like your decision to follow Ranger instead of the protocol. When Megan looked up in surprise, he continued. I owe you an apology, Foster. The way we've been conducting searches, strictly adhering to statistical models and probability maps, it works for most situations, but today we needed something the computers couldn't calculate. Megan finished for him. Exactly. Reynolds reached down to tentatively pat Ranger's head, a gesture Megan had never seen from the commander before. Whatever it is, this dog can sense whatever connection allowed him to find them. When our models pointed elsewhere, it saved 2 lives today. Megan thought about the countless hours spent training with Ranger, the bond they had developed that transcended conventional handler-dog relationships. Despite her scientific training and natural skepticism, she had come to accept that her partner possessed abilities that defied easy explanation. I think some animals can perceive things we can't, she said carefully. Whether it's scent detection at levels beyond our technology or something more intuitive about the life force of other beings, I don't know. But I've learned to trust it even when it contradicts everything else. Reynolds considered this, his expression thoughtful. My grandfather was a tracker in the Adirondacks back in the 1940s and 50s. Could find lost hikers when nobody else could. Used to say he didn't find people. The forest showed him where they were if he listened properly. He smiled slightly at the memory. I always thought it was just a colorful way of describing experience and skill. Now, I wonder if he was trying to explain something similar to what you're describing with Ranger. Before Megan could respond, a doctor emerged from the treatment area, surgical cap still in place. Officer Foster, I'm Dr. Elena Rivera, Pediatric Emergency Medicine. I wanted to update you on Sophie Parker. How is she? Megan asked, standing up. Remarkably well considering what she's been through. Dr. Rivera smiled. Her core temperature is almost back to normal, and all neurological responses are appropriate for her age. That's wonderful news. Megan replied, relief evident in her voice. The car seat protected her during the crash, but something else protected her from the cold. Dr. Rivera continued holding up a woman's winter coat, its lining torn open in places. This was wrapped around her snowsuit, providing an additional insulation layer. Based on the damage pattern to the mother's clothing, she took off her own coat and wrapped it around the child before leaving the vehicle. The revelation struck Megan deeply. Olivia Parker hadn't just survived the unsurvivable. She had prioritized her child's survival over her own, giving up her primary cold weather protection before attempting to find help. She sacrificed her own chances to increase her daughter's, Megan said quietly. Dr. Rivera nodded, her expression solemn. People often speak of maternal instinct as something poetic or metaphorical, but in cases like this, we see it as something profound and very real, a biological imperative powerful enough to overcome catastrophic injury and impossible odds. As the doctor departed, Reynolds turned to Megan. I'm modifying the SAR protocols effective immediately. When a certified search dog shows persistent directional indication outside the assigned grid, handlers will have discretion to investigate, provided they maintain continuous communication. Megan blinked in surprise. Reynolds had built his career on strict adherence to protocol and statistical models. What changed your mind? She asked. Reynolds looked down at Ranger, who remained alert despite his exhaustion. In 30 years of search and rescue, I've learned that sometimes the difference between success and failure isn't in the equipment or the protocols or even the training. Sometimes it's recognizing when to trust something you don't fully understand. The days following the rescue were filled with debriefings, reports, and media attention that Megan did her best to deflect. The story of the miracle rescue in impossible conditions had captured public imagination, particularly the elements involving the mother's extraordinary efforts to protect her child and Ranger's uncanny ability to find them against all odds. A week after the rescue, Megan received a call from the hospital. Olivia Parker had regained consciousness and was asking to meet the team that had saved her and her daughter. Despite her general aversion to hospital visits, too many memories of saying goodbye to Megan agreed to go. The intensive care unit was quiet except for the soft beeping of monitors and the occasional murmured conversation between medical staff. Olivia's room was easy to identify by the colorful collection of flowers, cards, and stuffed animals that had accumulated during her recovery. Megan hesitated at the doorway, suddenly uncertain. Ranger, however, had no such reservations. He moved forward with gentle purpose, his demeanor shifting automatically to the calm, therapeutic presence he exhibited during his occasional therapy dog visits. Olivia Parker looked nothing like the critically injured woman they had pulled from beneath the fallen tree a week earlier. Though still pale and obviously weakened with her leg, suspended in a complex external fixator and various tubes and wires connecting her to monitoring equipment, her eyes were alert and focused. Her dark hair had been washed and neatly braided, and despite the circumstances, she radiated a quiet determination that Megan immediately recognized as the same force that had driven her to attempt the impossible ascent toward help. "Officer Foster." Olivia smiled, her voice stronger than Megan had expected. "And Ranger, please come in." In a portable crib beside the bed, Sophie played contentedly with colorful toys, occasionally babbling happy nonsense as she caught sight of her mother. The child showed no visible signs of her ordeal, her chubby cheeks pink with health, her eyes bright with the resilience only the very young possess. "You're looking much better than the last time I saw you," Megan said, approaching the bed, while Ranger sat politely at the threshold, awaiting permission to enter further. "Thanks to you and your amazing partner," Olivia replied, her gaze shifting to Ranger. "Is it okay if he comes closer?" Megan nodded. "Ranger, visit," she commanded softly, and the dog moved forward with gentle dignity, his demeanor completely different from his working mode. He approached the bed carefully, allowing Olivia to extend her hand toward him. "You saved us," she said simply, her fingers gently stroking Ranger's head. "The doctor said Sophie and I had minutes left, not hours, when you found us." "Ranger found you," Megan corrected. "He insisted on searching that area despite it being outside our assigned grid." From her crib, Sophie noticed the dog and gave an excited squeal, reaching pudgy hands toward him. The rescue dog moved with extraordinary gentleness, sitting beside the crib where Sophie could see him clearly but not quite reach him. "She's not afraid at all," Olivia observed with wonder. "After everything that happened, you'd think she might be traumatized, but the pediatric psychologist says she's showing no signs of lasting distress. Children are incredibly resilient," Megan said, "and she had the best protection possible. Olivia's expression grew somber. "I don't remember everything. I remember the storm getting worse as I was driving home from visiting my parents. Then the car sliding." She closed her eyes, briefly reliving the moment. "After that, just fragments. Coming to inside the car, everything crushed around me. Sophie crying in the back." She looked toward her daughter with an expression of such profound love that Megan felt like an intruder witnessing it. "I remember realizing the car wasn't visible from the road. I checked Sophie. First, the car seat had protected her, but she was getting cold. I wrapped my coat around her snowsuit, made sure she was secure." Her voice caught slightly. "I told her I'd be right back with help." Olivia looked down at her heavily bandaged leg. "The pain, I've never felt anything like it. When I moved, I knew my leg was broken badly. I could feel the bone." She shuddered. "But I kept thinking about Sophie alone in the car, about how no one would find us unless I reached the road. I remember beginning to climb, using trees to pull myself up. Every movement was agony. I remember the tree falling. I just reached that ridge when I heard a crack above me. I couldn't move fast enough." She looked directly at Megan. The next clear memory I have is waking up here 3 days later with my parents telling me Sophie was safe. The doctors called it a series of miracles. Olivia continued the way the car crumpled but left Sophie's seat intact. How I survived the initial crash, that I managed to climb as far as I did with those injuries, that your dog found us both before the second storm hit. She studied Ranger with wonder. Why did you believe him when everyone else thought you should search elsewhere? Megan considered carefully. Because in 5 years together, he's never been wrong about finding someone still alive. I can't explain how he does it, whether it's scent detection, beyond what we understand, or something more intuitive. But Ranger understands things on a level that goes beyond training. He knew you were out there, knew you were alive, and wasn't going to stop until we found you. As they prepared to leave, Olivia asked one more question. When you found me, was I still holding Sophie's stuffed rabbit? Megan turned back surprised. Yes, actually, it was clutched in your right hand so tightly that the paramedics had trouble getting you to release it, even unconscious. Olivia nodded, tears filling her eyes. That was her first gift from my parents. I grabbed it from the car before I started climbing, thinking if I didn't make it back, at least rescuers would know I had a child, that they should look for her. You never stopped fighting for her, Megan said quietly, not for a single moment. Olivia's smile was tinged with both sadness and profound gratitude. And neither did you and Ranger. Thank you for believing he knew what he was doing when no one else did. 3 weeks later, Megan sat in her living room, reviewing training materials for a winter survival course she would be teaching to volunteer search and rescue candidates. Ranger dozed near the wood stove, occasionally twitching in his sleep as he chased dream rabbits, or perhaps rescued dream victims. The media attention following the Parker rescue had finally subsided, allowing Megan to return to her normal routine. Reynolds had made good on his promise to modify the search protocols, incorporating a new section that acknowledged the potential value of trained search dogs' directional indications, even when they contradicted established search patterns. More surprisingly, he had asked Megan to develop a training curriculum specifically focused on strengthening the intuitive bond between handlers and their dogs. Whatever you and Ranger have, he had said, we need to try to replicate it with other teams. The doorbell rang, startling Ranger from his nap. He was immediately alert, moving to the door with curious anticipation rather than alarm. Megan checked her watch, not expecting any visitors on a Tuesday evening, especially with another snowstorm brewing outside. Opening the door revealed a surprise Olivia Parker, standing on her porch supported by crutches with her parents, waiting in an idling car at the end of the short driveway. Even more surprising was Sophie, bundled against the cold in her mother's front carrier, peering out with bright, curious eyes. Olivia, Megan said, shocked. You should be in the hospital still. What are you doing here? They released me yesterday to my parents' care, Olivia explained. Before heading back to Sacramento, I wanted to thank you properly. She awkwardly maneuvered a small gift bag hanging from one crutch handle, something for both you and Ranger. Megan invited them in, helping Olivia navigate the step into the cabin. Ranger greeted them with gentle enthusiasm, particularly focused on the baby, who squealed with delight upon recognizing the dog. She remembers him, Olivia said with amazement. The pediatric psychologist says it's unusual for children her age to maintain such clear memories, especially from traumatic events. Some connections transcend trauma. Megan replied, helping Olivia settle into a comfortable chair near the fire. How's your recovery going? Slower than I'd like, but better than the doctors initially predicted. Olivia admitted, the orthopedic surgeon says I might regain up to 90% function in my leg eventually. The physical therapy is challenging. Sophie, now freed from her carrier, immediately crawled toward Ranger, who lay down to make himself less intimidating. The baby fearlessly patted his fur, giggling when he gently licked her hand. She's completely fearless with him, Olivia observed. Won't go near any other dogs, gets terrified and cries, but with Ranger it's like they have some understanding. Megan watched the interaction with fascination. They went through something significant together. Maybe she senses that he was part of saving her. Open your gift, Olivia urged. It's not much, but it has meaning. Inside the gift bag, Megan found a beautifully crafted, wooden picture frame containing a photograph of Ranger with Sophie taken during their hospital visit. The frame was engraved with a simple message, "To our guardian angel with 4 paws." But it's beautiful, Megan said, genuinely touched by the thoughtful gesture. "There's something else at the bottom," Olivia added. Beneath the tissue paper lay a small envelope. Inside was a formal invitation to Sophie's 2nd birthday party, still 6 months away, along with a note. "I know we're practically strangers," Olivia had written, "but some connections are formed in extraordinary moments. Sophie and I would be honored if you and Ranger would be part of our lives going forward. Heroes should know the lives they've saved." Megan looked up, surprised by the unexpected invitation into their lives. Since Paul's death, she had carefully maintained emotional distance from others, focusing on work and keeping personal attachments to a minimum. The idea of forming connections beyond professional boundaries felt both foreign and vaguely threatening. Yet watching Sophie playing with Ranger, seeing the genuine gratitude and openness in Olivia's expression, Megan felt something shift within her. Perhaps it was time to allow new connections to acknowledge that saving lives wasn't just about the technical rescue, but also about what happened afterward. "We'd be honored," she said finally. "Though I'm not sure I qualify as a hero, I just followed my dog. Sometimes the most heroic thing we can do is trust when everything logical tells us not to," Olivia replied. "I learned that when I left Sophie in that car to find help. Every instinct screamed to keep her with me, but something deeper told me she had a better chance if I left her secured in her seat." They talked for nearly an hour, the conversation flowing more easily than Megan would have expected. She learned that Olivia was an environmental lawyer, specializing in water rights, ironically the very field Megan had abandoned after Paul's death. They discovered mutual connections to UC Davis, where Olivia had completed her law degree around the same time Megan would have been finishing her master's had she stayed. "It's strange how lives intersect," Olivia mused as her parents flashed their headlights, signaling it was time to leave before the snowstorm intensified. "If you had continued in environmental engineering, we might have met in a courtroom or consultation room instead of on the side of a mountain in a blizzard." Mayford. As Megan helped Olivia back to the waiting car, Sophie, now sleeping peacefully in her carrier Ranger, followed closely his attention, focused on the baby until the very last moment. "He's still watching out for her," Olivia observed, settling into the back seat. "Some connections don't end just because the rescue is over," Megan replied, surprising herself with the insight. After their visitors departed, Megan returned to her cabin, the photograph of Ranger and Sophie now displayed prominently on her mantle. She realized it was the first personal photograph she had displayed since removing the pictures of Paul years earlier. "Things change, don't they, boy?" she said to Ranger, who had resumed his position by the fire. "Sometimes in ways we never expect." 6 months later, Megan stood at the edge of Echo Ridge watching as Ranger traced a practice search pattern through the spring wildflowers that had replaced winter snow. The mountains looked entirely different. Now vibrant green forests contrasting against distant snow-capped peaks. The landscape transformed from threatening to welcoming. The search and rescue protocols had been officially updated throughout the region, with a new section specifically addressing canine directional indications that contradicted probability models. Megan had been asked to help draft the language drawing on her experience with Ranger to create guidelines that balance structured search patterns with the unique capabilities certain dogs demonstrated. More significantly, Megan had developed and implemented a new training module for handler dog teams, focusing on strengthening the intuitive connections that went beyond conventional command-response training. The program initially met with skepticism from some of the more traditionally minded team members, had yielded promising results. 2 other dog teams had recently demonstrated the same type of intuitive directional indication that had led Ranger to Olivia and Sophie. "You started something important," Torres commented, joining her on the ridge. Their working relationship had evolved into a genuine friendship over the past months, strengthened by the shared experience of the Parker rescue and its aftermath. "Ranger started it," Megan corrected. "I just finally paid attention." "Either way, you've changed how we approach search operations." Reynolds is even talking about presenting the new protocols at the national conference next fall. Megan watched as Ranger completed his practice pattern, returning to her side with the focused energy that always characterized his work. The bond between them had deepened further since the Parker rescue, evolving into something that transcended the traditional handler-dog relationship. She had begun to accept that some connections defied conventional understanding, whether between humans and animals or between people whose lives intersected at critical moments. Her radio crackled with the day's training parameters. A volunteer was hidden somewhere on the western slope, playing the role of an injured hiker for the team's monthly certification exercise. Ranger would need to locate them, using only scent without prior knowledge of their position. "Ready for the training scenario, boy?" she asked. Ranger's ears perked forward in eager anticipation. Before she could issue the search command, a familiar voice called from the parking area behind her. "Officer Foster, Menina na 100 siya ng Danish." Turning, Megan saw Olivia Parker approaching along the trail, her gait still showing a slight limp, but remarkably recovered from her injuries. Beside her, little Sophie toddled energetically, clutching her mother's hand for balance. The child had grown considerably in the 6 months since the rescue, transforming from the bundled infant in the car seat to a confident toddler exploring the world with enthusiastic curiosity. "Mrs. Parker." Megan greeted them with pleasure rather than surprise. Over the past months, they had maintained regular contact with Megan, occasionally visiting them in Sacramento, and Olivia sending weekly updates on Sophie's development. "This is unexpected. We were driving through on our way to my parents' place and saw the search and rescue vehicles," Olivia explained. Sophie recognized the emblems immediately. She's a bit obsessed with rescue workers now. The toddler looked up at Megan with wide, curious eyes before her attention locked onto Ranger Wanger. She exclaimed with delight, using her personal pronunciation of the dog's name. "That's right, Ranger," Megan confirmed, kneeling down to Sophie's level. "He's happy to see you too." As if understanding he was being discussed, Ranger approached carefully, his demeanor instinctively gentler. Around the small child, Sophie showed no fear, reaching out with perfect confidence to pat his fur. "She's been like this with every dog we've met since the accident," Olivia explained. "No fear whatsoever. The therapist thinks maybe on some level she remembers that a dog was part of her rescue." Sophie giggled as Ranger gave her cheek a gentle lick, then pressed something into his fur, a small stuffed dog that bore a remarkable resemblance to him. "We got that for her last month," Olivia said. "She sleeps with it every night, calls it Little Wanger." Her attempt at Little Ranger. Megan felt a warmth spread through her chest that had nothing to do with the spring sunshine. In her years of search and rescue work, successful finds were usually followed by case numbers, reports, and statistics. Rarely did she see the lasting impact on those saved. "How have you been recovering?" she asked Olivia. "Better than expected. The doctors still call it a medical miracle, but I think it's more about having something worth fighting for," Olivia replied, watching her daughter interact with Ranger. "The physical therapy has been brutal, but I'm up to about 80% function in my leg now. The nightmares are less frequent too." She hesitated, then continued. "I wanted to remind you about Sophie's birthday party next weekend. You and Ranger are still coming, right? She talks about him constantly, and I've told everyone about how you trusted your partner when protocol said otherwise. We wouldn't miss it," Megan assured her, surprised to realize how much she was looking forward to the event. 6 months ago, she would have invented an excuse to avoid such a personal gathering, but now the prospect felt not just acceptable, but welcome. "I have news too," Olivia added, a hint of excitement in her voice. "I've accepted a position with the Sierra Environmental Legal Defense Fund. We'll be relocating to Pinecrest permanently at the end of the month." "What? That's wonderful," Megan replied, genuinely pleased. "The area will benefit from your expertise, and," she hesitated, then finished the thought, "and it will be nice having you both nearby." Torres approached respectfully, acknowledging their conversation had turned personal. "Foster, we're ready to begin the training exercise whenever you are." "Thanks, Nathan. We'll be right there." To Olivia, she explained, "We're conducting a certification exercise. Would you like to watch?" It might be interesting given what you experienced, Arno. Olivia nodded eagerly. Sophie would love that, and honestly, so would I. As they walked toward the training areas, Sophie insisted on walking beside Ranger, rather than holding her mother's hand. The dog adjusted his pace perfectly to accommodate the toddler's unsteady gait, positioning himself to prevent her from straying toward any hazards. It's amazing how he watches out for her, Olivia observed, almost like he still feels responsible for her safety. Some connections go beyond the moment they're formed. Megan replied, watching the unlikely pair. I used to think rescue work ended when the victim was delivered to medical care. Now I understand it's sometimes just the beginning of something else. Reynolds approached from the command post, his expression warming at the sight of Olivia and Sophie. He had visited them in the hospital several times during their recovery, bringing stuffed animals for Sophie and updates on the protocol changes their rescue had inspired. Mrs. Parker, what a pleasant surprise, he greeted her. And Miss Sophie getting bigger every time I see you. Sophie beamed up at him before returning her attention to Ranger, clearly having established her priorities. Worry, they're going to observe the training exercise. Megan explained, I thought it might be interesting, given their personal experience. Ishari, Reynolds nodded approvingly. Excellent idea. Perhaps seeing the process from the other side provides a certain closure. To Olivia, he added, your rescue has changed how we approach our work. The new protocols have already led to 2 successful recoveries that might have been missed under our previous models. As the training exercise began, Megan prepared to issue Ranger's search command. The dog stood at perfect attention, awaiting instruction, his body language communicating eager readiness. Find them, Ranger, she commanded, releasing him to begin the search pattern. Watching him work methodically, covering ground, testing air currents, processing information beyond human perception, Megan reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought them all together. From the flood rescue where she'd found a traumatized puppy to the blizzard, where that same dog had defied statistical models to find 2 people against impossible odds. Their path had been anything but predictable. Sophie watched in fascination as Ranger disappeared into the trees, then looked up at Megan with complete trust. Wanger find, she stated with absolute certainty. Yes, Megan agreed, feeling a sense of peace that had eluded her for years. Ranger will find them? That's what he does. Olivia slipped her hand into Megan's, the gesture natural and supportive. And you trust him enough to listen when others would doubt. That's what you do. In that moment, with the spring sun warming the mountain landscape around them, Megan understood that the most profound rescues weren't always physical. Sometimes they were about finding connections that healed wounds deeper than any visible injury. The hidden damages of loss and isolation that no medical intervention could address. Ranger's distant bark signaled a successful find right on schedule. As expected, he had located the volunteer victim with his characteristic efficiency. But Megan knew his greatest discovery had been showing her that life after loss was still possible, that connections severed by tragedy could be replaced by new ones forged in the most unexpected circumstances. He found them, Sophie announced proudly, as though she had never doubted the outcome for a moment. He always does, Megan replied, squeezing Olivia's hand gently. That's the thing about guardians. They show up exactly when and where they're needed most, even when we don't know we need them. As Ranger emerged from the trees, leading the team back toward them with the located victim, his eyes immediately sought Sophie, checking her position and safety before reporting his successful mission to Megan. The silent communication between them reflected years of partnership and trust, but also something deeper, an understanding that some bonds transcend training and logic, existing in that mysterious space where intuition and connection intertwine. In a world increasingly governed by statistical models and technology, Ranger had demonstrated the enduring power of instinct and intuition, the ability to sense what machines and algorithms might miss. More importantly, he had shown Megan that sometimes the most important rescues happen long after the official mission ends. In the quiet healing of connections found trust renewed and hearts reopened to possibility. Have you ever wondered what drives a rescue dog to continue searching long after others have given up hope? The story of Ranger finding Olivia and Sophie Parker isn't just about canine training, it's about something deeper that science struggles to fully explain. Perhaps it's the result of thousands of years of coevolution between humans and dogs, creating bonds and understanding that transcend our logical comprehension. Or maybe it's something more mysterious, an intuitive connection that allows certain animals to perceive human needs in ways we're only beginning to understand. Have you or someone you know ever been helped by a rescue animal? Or perhaps you've witnessed an animal sensing something that humans couldn't detect, a coming storm, an unseen danger, or even illness in a family member. Share your experiences in the comments below. If this story of canine heroism touched your heart, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more incredible tales of remarkable dogs who go above and beyond. Press the notification bell to never miss our new uploads, and share this video with friends and family who appreciate the extraordinary bond between humans and their four-legged heroes.